The third stanza of Marvell's poem, The Garden. Marvell introduces in the third stanza another goal that men, women have pursued, besides personal glory. He remembers the reader of the tradition of courtly love and all the poets who have celebrated fair ladies whose cheeks are rose and lilies. A woman's beauty is nothing compared to this garden. Fond lovers here means foolish lovers, and they are cruel as their flame, because as the flame consumes or destroys things, so too the foolish lovers to destroy themselves because passion does not last long. Our passion burns and consumes. The poet continues to develop his extended conceit of the garden's superior virtues, finding its lovely green more favorable than the red and white, which are the colors poets use most often in erotic. Poetic to describe the lips, teeth, and face body of a beloved, lovers may carve the name of the beloved into trees, but the poets or the speaker finds such actions to be futile, because each tree already contains a more beautiful imprint or proper name by using his image. Marvell refers to the Renaissance doctrine of signaturism, or signature of all things, which held that God imprinted each entity he created with a sign of its proper name, and give Adam the power to recognize this sign. The speaker or poet thus imagine his experience in the garden as a paradisal return to Adam's perfect knowledge of creation. Now in the fourth stanza, the poet relying on his readers' familiarity with literary tradition, he reverses the meaning of those metamorphoses sung by Ovid, wherein fair ladies chased by amorous gods are transformed into trees, where passion has run its course. Love turns people towards a contemplative life surrounded by nature. The two examples from Greek mythology of Apollo and Pan, who chased the nymph for what they were and not for that into which they were to be metamorphosed. On examining the lines more closely, they really represent the notion that Apollo and Pan were like the vain man in the first stanza who sought after early material prizes, thinking that they would prove of great value, but when only rewarded with the narrow verge shade provided by a laurel or a reed. In the fifth stanza, there is a characteristic modulation of tone from gay, witty, paradoxical assertions of the garden's supremacy to rich hyperbolical description of its delight. The garden itself has become the wooer. Apples dropped on his head, grapes crushed their wine on his mouth. The attractive, curious use of the peach implies not only that it is exquisite, but that it is importunately inquiring. Maiden made him stumble, flowers ensnare him. The whole garden is as if in active pursuit, and he falls on grass. The sixth stanza, the rich sensuousness of the last stanza, that is the fifth one, leads into another change of tone. In the next stanza, where the poem moves to its climax and speech of the mind in the act of contemplation, the tempo changes with we read more slowly when inappropriate according to the substance or matter of the next two stanza, to a green thought in a green shade. It denotes the creative power of the intellect. Professor Emerson, some versions of pastoral detects two main ambiguities or puns in the stanza, one of which seems to enrich the meaning and is therefore likely to have been intended by the poet. The other seems to contradict the meaning and to be therefore inadmissible. The first ambiguity is in the phrase "from pleasureless," which can grammatically mean both the mind withdraws from the lesser pleasures of worldly life. Second, and the mind, diminished by pleasure, now withdraws into its true happiness. Both meanings are consonant with the total sense of the stanza. The second ambiguity suggested is that thus straight its own resemblance fine means both thus straight away fine, thus fine strengthen or narrow. The second is unacceptable because it's conflict with the total effect of magnifying the mind. The mind is an ocean which, as was believed of the real ocean, contains within it a replica of a creature's. But the mind does even more than the ocean. It not only reproduces, but it creates. It is capable of annihilating all that's made and doing what Coleridge was later to define as the work of secondary imagination, which dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate. When Marvell speaks of the mind annihilating green shade, he again suggests the garden can lead back to the Garden of Eden and pristine innocence. In the last stanza, the garden is compared to a galaxy zodiac. The bee's work represents time, and the flowers give us a reading of the different seasons in nature. These two stanzas, 6 and 7, are the climax of the poem, to which all the precedes them leaves. We are to reject fame, courtly love, and all that men seek in busy companies of men, because it is in the solitude and peace of the garden that the soul can best prepare itself for heaven. It is the climax, but it is not the end of Marvell's poem. He is too much aware of the world and of the reality of man's fallen state to think of the enjoyment of the garden's beauty and the contemplation of externity as a permanent refuge. The garden is a temporary retreat reminiscent of paradise. In the stanza 8, he reminds us of what happened there. There is a note of sardonic amusement in the reference to Eve. The last stanza of the poem brings us back to the actual garden that inspired the poem, the garden at Appleton House. Hours spent in the garden, free from the pressure of time, can be measured by a dial made of hearts, wherein the industrious bee counts the time, and the bee too reminds us that we'll live in a work a day well. Thank you for listening, guys. If you like it, subscribe it.